to today's presentation, Sage Intacct 2023 R3 release, What You Should Know. We're so glad you were able to join us. My name is Nancy Kahlo, and I'm in the marketing department at Markham Technology, and I'll be your host for today's session. Sorry. Okay. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items to cover. So Markham LLP and Markham Technology LLC have prepared these materials as part of an educational program. The information contained herein is of a general nature and is not intended to address the circumstances of any particular individual, entity, or case. While every effort has been made to offer current and accurate information, errors can occur. Furthermore, laws and regulations referred to in this program may change over time and should be interpreted only in the light of particular circumstances. The information presented here should not be construed as legal, tax, accounting, or valuation advice. No one should act on such information without appropriate professional advice after a thorough examination of the particular circumstances or situation. Now, logistics. During today's program, you can submit questions to our presenters using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom platform. They will get to as many questions as they can at the end of the webinar. We will also be emailing a copy of the slides and a link to the recording to all attendees post-event. If you would like to receive continuing professional education credits for CPAs, which, by the way, this webinar is eligible for 1 CPE credit. So you can receive a credit, but you will need to be active in the platform for a minimum of 50 minutes and answer 3 polling questions that will appear on your screen at random times during the presentation. Each polling question will be active for 1 minute. Please be sure to select an answer and submit your responses for tracking purposes. Also, please allow 24 to 48 hours for us to process your CPE credits. Now that we got the logistics and the boring stuff out of the way, I'll pass it along to Bu-Lin Tran, Vice President of Markham Technology. Bu-Lin?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today is on Sage Intacct 2023 R3 release that was just released earlier this month. So we're super excited to go through some of the new functionality with this release. Our agenda today is really one topic. We're going to highlight the 2023 R3 release in the next hour. And hopefully we have some time left over for any Q&A questions. So next slide, please. So good afternoon. I'm Bu-Lin Tran. I'm a VP in our financial solutions practice here at Markham Technology. I have over 25 plus years of experience working with clients that are in primarily nonprofit industry, helping organizations streamline their back office accounting operations as well as systems. Other experience that I have, in addition to on the ERP side and the ERP accounting systems, is working with clients on the budgeting, reporting, including AP automation. So that's just a quick update for me. Troy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Troy Minor, been with the firm for about 15 and a half years, supporting Sage Intacct, Marta's budgeting, Dynamics GP. I'm involved with implementations, training, and of course, providing support as well.
Thank you. So our today's learning objectives are identify core new features of Sage Intacct 2023 R3, demonstrate some of the new functionality. This is a technical webinar. We're going to go through features and functionality of the system, and then talking about the benefits of these new functionality, how you may want to use them within your organization. So we're just going to have 2 slides just to introduce who we are as a firm. So who is Markham and Markham Technology? Next slide, please. So Markham Technology is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Markham LLP CPA firm. As you can see here, Markham LLP is 12th largest in the US. We're a national firm. And then right below here, you can see the various industries that we serve, both Troy and I are out of the DC area, and we have a lot of experience working with in the nonprofit and social services sector. Next slide, please. Within Markham, we're part of Markham Technology. So Markham Technology is the technology arm of the CPA firm. And within Markham Technology, we have 5 pillars of services, as you can see here. Both Troy and I are part of digital consulting, and within digital consulting, we have a number of practices, including financial ERP solutions. So within the ERP solutions, Markham actually supports 4 ERP solutions, 2 of which are cloud-based SaaS solution. They include Sage Intacct, which we'll be going over today, and Acumatica. We also support 2 legacy systems. They're both Microsoft Dynamics GP, which is Great Plains, and Dynamics SL. As also part of the digital consulting, we also support FP&A solutions as well, and they include Planful and Vena. Other pillars here, strategic consulting is a service where we support clients on assessments, looking at their back office accounting operations and IT operations, performing assessments in those areas. We also have cloud and infrastructure solutions where we provide private cloud services, infrastructure support, and disaster recovery. We also support managed IT services where clients outsource their IT support, such as IT help desk support. And then finally, we've got cybersecurity and digital forensic, where we help clients secure their business. Next slide, please. So this brings us to our first polling question, and which is, how long have you been using Sage Intacct? And select the one that is appropriate to you. You could be the last one, which is currently not on Sage Intacct, but are thinking about getting onto Sage Intacct. All right. So we're going to move on to our topic for today. Troy?
Thank you, Bulin. So today, as Bulin mentioned, we're going to go through some of the new features that have been released in Release 3. And we're going to start with the vendor approval. And so basically, the vendor approval, it's a simple workflow, but definitely something that was badly needed. Whenever a user, when you have this product turned on, whenever a user creates a vendor, it gets submitted for approval. And then once it's approved, it can be used in accounts payable. Also, if it's an existing vendor, and the change is made, such as a change of address or some other change on the vendor record, you can no longer use that vendor until that change is approved. And so I'm going to show you how that is set up here. Right, so to enable it, I'm going to go into accounts payable, setup, I'm going into configuration. And as I scroll down to configuration, there is an option to enable, I think I passed it. Here we go. An option to enable vendor approval. And so you'll check that box and you'll save it, and that enables the vendor approval. One thing you should know about vendor approvals is that the user who submits the vendor cannot approve their own vendor, even if you're an administrator. If you submit the vendor and you have rights to actually do approvals, you will not be able to approve a vendor that you created or modified. Also, the other thing you need to know about vendor approvals is there's an actual new security item that needs to be updated. So I'm going to go to company setup. I'm going to admin. I'm going to roles. And within the admin role, I'm going to go to accounts payable. And of course, it doesn't have to be the admin role. And there's a new item here, it's approve vendors, and your only option is list. But in order for someone to actually approve, they have to have this option here. Otherwise, they will not even see that the ability to actually do the approval. When we go to accounts payable, right under the vendor item, there's approved vendors. And so here I have a vendor that was submitted by Jacob Coleman, and the vendor's name is Acme Products. And as an approver, I can view what was set up. I can approve it or I can decline it. If I choose to decline, I also have the ability to put some details in, such as this could be a dupe. And so I would decline it, and it comes off the queue. So that's, I mean, it's a very simple, but a very powerful and important piece of the workflow system.
And Troy, you also mentioned that if there's a change to the vendor, it would also be submitted for approval.
That is correct. So if you make any change, such as the address, even the vendor name changes, it puts it back in the queue. And while it's sitting in the queue to be approved, you cannot do any processing with that vendor. It's almost as if that vendor was made inactive.
So I would say that the follow-up question to that people might be curious about is that when you get the email, let's say you make a changes to the vendor, when you get the email, how detailed is that email? Does it show you what changes was made? Or would you have to go and see that through the audit? I would go to, if you want to see what the changes were that were made, you would go to the audit trail on the vendor record. Yeah, so it doesn't reflect the changes in the email. It's basically generic email.
It's pretty generic. And I suspect, though, that later on, there will be some enhancements to that. I mean, to me, that's low-hanging fruit, and that should be something that they can do easily. I mean, especially since they already have the data sitting there in the audit trail record. And as I mentioned, this was part of workflow. There's additional AP workflow that's available to you as well in a couple of different flavors. So there's the purchasing workflow, where you can actually start your transactions, your spending in the purchasing module. So you could have a purchase requisition that goes through an approval process, and then that requisition can be converted to a purchase order. The order for the materials or services can be placed. Then there's a receiving document that can be recorded. And then, of course, it can be converted to an invoice. You can go directly from a purchase order to a vendor invoice. So they all have an approval process, and the approval process can be tailored to your requirements. You can have approvals based upon dollar amounts. You can have approvals based upon project managers, employee managers. You have a lot of options in terms of how to get those transactions approved before you actually spend the funds. There is also AP bill automation as well. So AP bill automation will streamline your AP processes quite a bit. There's some third-party products that already are out there that they seem to do it well, but now Sage Intacct has incorporated AP bill automation. And basically, there's a couple of ways to get the bills in the system. One way is, of course, is to have the bills emailed to an email address that's assigned to you by Sage Intacct. And the other way is to actually load an electronic copy of the invoice into the system. And in both cases, the system reads the document and tries to pre-code it. Now, of course, when you first implement AP bill automation, there's some learning that the system has to do. But the longer you have it and the more you use it, the smarter the system gets. And it will begin to recognize repeat vendors with repeat invoices. And it will basically pre-code transactions fairly accurately for you. In the event that it can't code something, maybe it's a new vendor or it can't read the document, there will be some windows that show you what the exceptions are. If there's something about the document that it just can't read, it can't make out, the total dollar amounts, it goes into an exception queue, and then a user can go in and update that document appropriately. Also, it doesn't automatically necessarily read the document and then just start posting the document. Users get a chance to review the data before it is actually posted. So if you're not using some type of automation and workflow in your AP process, you may want to take a look at maybe the purchasing workflow, the purchasing AP, or the AP bill automation.
A couple of things to add to that is what I like about the email notification is that it gives you a little hyperlink to basically click here where you log into Sage Intacct, and you don't have to navigate anywhere else. It takes you directly to the screen where you would need to approve. So if it was a vendor approval like this one, it would directly take you to this screen. A user wouldn't have to hunt for it. And within the application, it just takes you exactly there. We actually have a question regarding this topic. So the question is, does it make vendor inactive across all facilities? So this is actually vendor approval. It doesn't make the vendor inactive. There are templates that you can use to update. We'll have to check. Some of the templates does allow updates, and some does, updates and or only does insert, and some does insert and update. But that's probably, if you wanted to do an update across all vendors, that's something that we will have to visit to see if it might be easier to just use a template, but it wouldn't be this functionality.
And just want to add to that, I just want to clarify something. I said in my statement, I was saying that it effectively makes the vendor inactive, in that you cannot use the vendor. It doesn't actually make it an inactive vendor. And specifically to your question, it's across all the entities. So if that vendor is loaded at the top level and you make a change to that vendor and you have the approval turned on, no entity will be able to use that vendor until it's approved.
Well, if your vendor is not approved, Troy, you wouldn't be able to submit something, or you wouldn't be able to pay the vendor. But you would be able to create an invoice as a draft. I believe that is possible. It's just that any processing behind it you wouldn't be able to do.
That's correct. That's correct. So while we're in accounts payable, I do want to take a look at the new list view functionality. I'm going to switch over and turn on the list beta interface. And the past few releases, there's been some enhancements to how you can use these lists, and it's greatly changed over the course of the past year. You can actually see here that the layout is a little bit different. There's a few more things going on. The screen's a little more active. And so I'm going to go through several of the enhancements that have occurred. Some of these occurred during this release, and some of them occurred in previous releases, but I think it would be helpful to review those. So natively out of the box, and even without using the beta list, you can actually filter the data in these lists. For example, here for the country, I could just type United, and it will filter the list and give me any countries that start with the word United. That's something that you've always had. Also, I can now choose this filter here, and I could say instead, use states. And so in this sample of data, it gives me the same results. But what this filter does, it looks through the whole string to see if it finds this value. Whereas when I type United, it only looked for countries that started with United. So that's very helpful. And my other options here are equals, not equal to, starts with, ends with, does not contain, is blank, which is a very good one to actually help you clean up your data. So if you're looking at vendor lists, and let's say you have a list that's filtered for 1099 vendors, but you don't have the tax ID numbers in, so it would be blank. This is an option that would help you identify that. Also, if you're missing cities or states and things like that, you could take full advantage of that filter as well. On the manage view, I have the option of taking this view that I have here and saving it. And so I've already saved one and I call it T minor, and I'm going to switch to that view. And on my view, I have a lot more fields going across that I can't see them all. One piece of new functionality that they added is the ability to freeze a couple of columns. So now, as I scroll to the right, I can still see which vendor record I'm looking at as I'm scrolling to the right. So that's very helpful. Also, there's an option to control the wrapping of the text. So if I were to move this address field over a little bit, and you see that some of these addresses are cut off. If I choose text wrapping and choose wrap, it will actually wrap as you normally see in, say, Excel. It would actually wrap the text so that you can actually see all of the data. It'll just kick it down to the next line. Additionally, I have some other filtering options here. And here I can have multiple filters that I can apply. And the great thing about this is you can actually filter on columns that are not part of your current view. As you can see, I actually have the list, the entire list of all the fields that are available in this view that I can actually filter on. And I can continue to add multiple levels of filter to get the data down to where I want it to be. And when I use the advanced filter, I can also use the and or the or option, which is helpful as well, because sometimes you do want a subset of data that's based upon one condition or another condition. So that's very helpful. And I have additionally the configure columns option. The configure columns option allows you to add fields on the fly to the view, as opposed to when you go to create a new view and you walk through the wizard. This option here lets you add new ones just on the fly. And so you click on them, choose apply, and then they just get added to the current view that you're looking at. Pay date value options. Yeah, that's not a good one. Let me take these off. That's not a good one, but let's go with name, first name, email address. And so I can add these on the fly. I figure out what that area is, pay date, value options. I'll troubleshoot that. But you can add them on the fly, and once they're on the fly, of course, I can do a save as, and I could take this view and save it as a new view. So I don't have to start from scratch, go into the wizard. I can actually create this view from one of the system views. So by default, when you go into these vendor lists, you'll be looking at the system view. I can actually add columns to the system view and then do a save as to create my own view. So I'm not going through the wizard, having to select 20 fields individually. So I find that to be quite helpful. So as this tip starts to mature, it seems to be more and more helpful.
Another comment to that is once you save a view, even if you switch off of this view, going back to the previous view that you had before, and you revert it back to this view, anything that was saved in this view are still going to be there. And additionally, when you create these views, you don't have to make them public. If you make them public, everyone else will see it. If it's a view that's just for yourself, if you don't make it public, only you will see it.
Correct. Thank you. I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint here.
So on the with this release, one of the things that is available is that if you're in healthcare, Sage has partnered with another partner to build a number of EMR integration with Sage Intacct. So this is very specific to companies in healthcare that use EMR's solutions. If you wanted to find out more information, let us know. But this is a great tool. If you are using EMR, it just makes integration so much easier with this utility.
And I would just want to add a couple of things to that. So, when you're talking about healthcare, one of your concerns is always, HIPAA compliancy. So Sage Intacct is HIPAA compliant. It is also high-tech compliant. So back in 2009, there was some legislation, I guess I'll call it legislation for lack of a better term, called the Health Information Technology for Economical and Clinical Health Act. And basically it was to encourage healthcare organizations to really push and take advantage of electronic medical records. So that push helps facilitate some automation between the electronic medical records and some accounting functions such as billing. So there's some automation there. You can push over financial billing information to the general ledger. You can push over statistical data from these from the EMR systems over into the statistical journal in Sage Intacct. For example, if you have a healthcare facility, you can actually track the numbers of available beds or revenue per bed and things like that. Also, this functionality supports multi-entity. And there's one other thing that just escaped my mind, but it's a great product, this EMR Connect. Oh, I know what it is. You can actually have multiple sources of data. So it doesn't have to be a one-to-one where all of the EMR data is coming from a single system. It can come from 2, 3, or even 4 different systems if that is the scenario.
Now, it doesn't work with all EMR, I'm just going to say that, but there is a selective list of EMR that it does connect with. So if you are using an EMR, you're wondering if there's a connector, let us know. And interestingly, a lot of folks know that Sage Intacct's largest customer base is in nonprofit. One of their other industry that they focus in is actually healthcare. So there are a lot of organizations that are in healthcare that are running Sage Intacct as well. So a few months ago, we did a webinar on Sage Intacct Payroll powered by ADP. And with this release, there's a few enhancements that came out with related to payroll. So these are the items that are listed here. If you wanted to find out more information, let us know. But I think ADP has really invested in Sage Intacct to build this integration and really tight integration in the various areas as well. So if you're interested in understanding, what is the ADP, what is the Sage Intacct Payroll powered by ADP means, and some of these integrations, feel free to reach out to us.
And to add to that, this is an opportunity to actually, marry or combine payroll data, people data, and accounting data in a single system to give you some additional visibility into your financials. Some of the functionality that I've seen with this product is there's some critical to-do lists. There's some payroll approval processes that are there. There's even some self-service functionality to allow employees to manage some of their benefit decisions. I saw a dashboard also that's really for like a HR professional where they could actually see how many people are actually taking advantage of the self-service. They're able to track how many people have actually started selecting their benefits, during the open enrollment period. And it looks like it could be a game changer. Some of the modules that are available are payroll, timekeeping, human resources, and benefits administration. So it may be something that you may find useful.
And if you're currently already on ADP and you're on Sage Intacct, and if you're interested in the integration, let us know. Now, ADP actually has two products. If you know, they've got a smaller product called Run, and a medium size or slightly larger product called Workforce Now. The integration is actually specific to the larger product, which is Workforce Now. And you know, if you're on ADP, even if you can go through Sage Intacct payroll, if you're already on ADP and you're interested in integrating, let's say, your payroll data, or maybe it's your timesheets, you know, let us know, and we'll connect you, you know, to the right folks there at ADP. So this brings us to our next question. How do you post your audit adjustment entry? So within Sage Intacct, how do you post that? Would be, you can post it as a regular journal entries like a GJ, or do you post it as an adjustment entry, or the third option, which is you never had audit adjustments, so it's not applicable?
So I'm going to jump back over into the software. And I'm going to jump over to projects. So one enhancement that they've recently added into projects is some budget visibility. So in the project summary tab now, there's a section called the financial summary. And in the financial summary section, we can see, you know, by entity, the deferred revenue, payments, total revenue. But the part that's really jumping out now is the budget. So you can see what the budget amount was and what the difference is between the budget and the actuals. So that was recently added to the project module. For users who aren't familiar with the project module, it comes in a couple of different flavors. So there's some organizations that'll use just the project dimension. And when they're using the project dimension, they're using it similar to something like the department dimension. It's just another dimension that you can use to tag a project on it. And it's really primarily used for reporting purposes, in that there's really no additional functionality added when you're using project tracking, other than the reporting that you get like you use when you use the other dimensions. But there's also job cost is available, and billing as well. So the job cost works very well with the timesheets in capturing the actual cost that you incur to perform a job. That will be labor, materials, and other direct costs. So there's the project tracking, there's the job cost, and then there's also project billing. So you can use your project costs to drive your billing. If you have costs coming, labor costs coming through from timesheets, and then you have other direct costs coming through accounts payable, you can, of course, set billable rates for those items. You can set markup percentages on the items that come through accounts payable, and you can have those items invoiced. Of course, they're marked up and or burdened with you know, some profit. You can have those items. The invoice is created for you automatically based upon the preset parameters that you put in. So if there's ODCs that come through accounts payable, you want to mark them up 10%, then that's what's going to be reflected on the invoice. And with on the labor piece, you can have, for lack of a better term, or what some people are familiar with, the labor categories. So Jane may be a project manager on one project, and she may be an analyst on the other project. And so when she bills, they'll be at two different rates. The project module is able to handle that. So when she's the project manager, her billable rate may be $175. When she's the analyst, it may be $125. And it is reflected appropriately on the invoices. So if you have an interest in something like that, please reach out to us and let us know. Lynn, you have any additional comments regarding?
No, I think this is a very strong module here, and just the only other item I just wanted to add is that there's a lot of information here. You know, as a project manager, you can go into the screen and take a look at, you know, the information. And you know, Troy was in the project summary showing you what are the numbers as of right now today. But you can, you know, in terms of managing, as a project manager, instead of managing the project, you can also add additional tabs to the screen and create user-defined information to track that information. And with that information, you can reflect it in reports, and different types of reports, statistical type reports. You can do dimensional based reporting. There's just different options you have in terms of presenting that information. So I think Troy and I are actually a big fan of this module. I think it's a very robust. And even for nonprofits, I know that when we talk about project billing, you tend, a lot of professional services people will be using that. But even for nonprofit, if you're grant funded, the Gen invoice may be helpful to basically create the receivable, so you can identify how much of the cost that you're expecting to be reimbursed for grants that are cost reimbursable grants.
Yes, and one other thing actually. So also in this module, there's resource management. So your staff has a specific skill set. Each person has a different skill set, and you may need to use them on multiple projects. The project module will allow you to assign staff members to various projects, and it will show you if you've over allocated or over scheduled someone, I guess, across multiple projects, because there's only a certain number of hours per week or per month that someone can work. You can use the resource management to help you manage that. And that's also, you can manage not only that, you can also record in the system what these individuals, what their skill sets are. So people who are project managers or solution architects, you can actually assign those to employees, and then you can actually search for those. So if you're a large organization and you need a resource on a project, or even to respond to an RFP, you can actually search resource management to see who has what set of skills. So we find that very useful. And back to Belinda's point, where she said you can add additional tabs. One example would be that if you receive a grant that requires you to submit reports, so let's say it's a 5-year grant, and at the end of every year, you have to submit a report in order to get the funding for the next year, you can actually create a tab in Sage Intacct on the project record for the reporting periods, and record whether or not those reports were submitted and when they were actually submitted. We can tailor those tabs pretty much to whatever data you need to collect. And as Belinda mentioned, that can actually be printed out or published out in a report as well. The next item I want to talk about is a new piece of functionality. It's called purchasing match tolerances. And in essence, what purchasing match tolerances does, it removes the need for someone to go to physically compare the original purchasing document with the purchasing document that was invoiced to you. So if you had a purchase order for $10,000, the vendor invoice came in at $10,100, is that okay? As opposed to if it came in at $12,000, that's probably not okay. So the purchasing match tolerances will do that kind of analysis for you automatically. I'm going to go to purchasing. I'm going to go into configuration. And in the purchasing match tolerance section, you specify which transaction definition that you have to validate. For users who are not using purchasing, transaction definitions basically is various different types of transactions, whether it's a purchase requisition, a purchase order, a vendor invoice. So those are different transaction definitions that we build based upon what your requirements are. And so here in this example, we are evaluating the vendor invoice, and we're saying it can be 10% more in terms of quantity, or 10% more in terms of price before it generates an exception. And so I'm going to jump over to a vendor invoice. And so on this vendor invoice here, the Staples, it generated an exception. And that's because the original purchase order was exceeded by more than 10%. So it has a state of being an exception state as opposed to it actually being posted. The trigger for comparing documents is that when you have transaction definitions, you tell Sage Intacct what kind of document can create this vendor invoice. So let me give you an example. You have your purchase order for Staples and the vendor invoice comes in, you can convert that purchase order into a vendor invoice. So purchase tolerance functionality goes back and looks at the document it was created from to do the comparison. And then based on my setup, if there's a difference greater than 10%, the state sits at exception. So this is new, but I think it's going to be very helpful to the users. The next item I want to, polling question.
So our next question is appropriate to the topic that we just showed, which is, do you use purchase order in Sage Intacct? And so, yes, we use purchase order, or yes, we use purchase order and commitments. We might consider using purchase order, no need to use purchase order. And if you're wondering what is a commitment, you can turn on commitment with purchase order so that normally purchase order doesn't create a journal entry or doesn't create entries. But if you turn on commitment, you can post the purchase order to essentially the commitment book and be able to report against what you've actually spent plus your commitments. To get your actuals, which is your actuals plus committed, and compare that against the budget. We have some clients that use this functionality, and you know, if you're interested in something like that, let us know.
Great. There's one other item I want to show you, but I do want to mention some other enhancements that have been made. So organizations that need to do consolidations, you know, the consolidations typically, you know, you generate some reports, and because of a lack of functionality in some systems, you have to drop those reports down in Excel and do a lot of manipulation in order to come out where you're supposed to be. The consolidations module in Sage Intacct has been greatly enhanced. It now includes functionality for partial ownership and tiered ownership. So the days of having to download multiple financials from different entities into Excel, entering in, simulating elimination entries in Excel in order to come up with the consolidation report is pretty much going to be eliminated because of the functionality that they've added. It works pretty well. We've had some clients who've actually used consolidations, and the one piece that was missing was the partial ownership when there was tiered ownership, and now Sage Intacct has gone and added that in. Will you have comments about?
Well, the only thing I was going to comment is that it is not part of the core. The consolidation is a separate module, but you know, if you have to do it in Excel, this is much better than doing it in Excel. It's worth paying for it.
Right. Also, contracts. So we have some clients who are using contracts. Prior to this release, you could not recognize revenue at the contract line item level. Now with this R3 release, you can now recognize revenue at the line item. One other item I want to show you here in the Help Center. I'm having a screen problem. If you go to the Help Center and choose Basics, there is now a glossary available for you for terms that are used in Sage Intacct. It's pretty extensive. And I would advise you to at least take a look at it. And you probably, you know, I know when I went through it, I learned a few things in here. So that's something I wanted to make you aware of. So you have the standard help, but now you have this glossary. Also, there's the Sage Intacct community. every now and then I come across a client who doesn't have access to it. So there's some resources available to you in the Sage Intacct community where you can go in and search for certain terms or search for ask certain questions in the community. And you can also see, what you also see is that someone else probably has already asked the question that you're planning to ask, and you can get some feedback on that as to whether Sage can actually do a particular function, or if they're planning, or if they have a lot of interest in it. So if you don't have access to the community, reach out to your partner and let them know that you would like to get access to that. So the next thing I want to show you is a change to the trial balance report, or should I say an enhancement to the trial balance report. So I'm going to jump over to general ledger, and I'm going to go trial balance. And when I scroll down to the formatting section, there's an option here to exclude adjustments. So if I don't choose that option, I get this report that has I didn't select a
Company.
location because I'm in multi-entity. So this is the report that it generates. So, you know, you have the columns you expect to have, but then you have these adjusting debit and adjusting credit columns. A lot of clients don't use those adjustment journals. And so now you have the option to generate that report without those extra columns. That option is not going to be available for you by default just because you go into the report. There is a requirement to make that option available, and that requirement is that you have to have at least one adjusting journal created. So some organizations will create adjustments, you know, audit adjustments or some other type of adjustments. They'll put them in the adjustment journals. Other organizations will just create just a regular standard journal. But once you create the adjusting journal, it will enable that flag for you on the trial balance report, and then you can actually run that report with those columns dropped off. That also makes it a little bit cleaner when you drop it into Excel as well.
Yes, and that brought us to one of our polling question was, how do you you know, how do you treat your audit adjustments? One way to track your audit adjustment is to use the adjustment journals, meaning that you book them, and so when you book them, you can see your audit adjustments in those separate columns that you just saw, and not separate from your regular, you know, journal entry. So that is one way. If you didn't want to use the adjustment, but you still wanted to see them separate, you can also create a separate journal for that. That could be another way to handle that. So there are some options. And of course, if you really, it doesn't matter with you that is as a regular that had to be separated, you can always book it as a regular journal entry.
Yeah, and just some comments, general comments about these quarterly releases. The functionality that I tend to like the best, or the functionality that creates efficiencies. For example, dynamic allocations was huge when that was released a while ago. If you're spending hours doing allocations every month, that is a add-on product, add-on module rather, that you should actually consider taking a look at, because it can reduce your hours down to a few minutes. You can do allocations based on percentages, or what I would call advanced allocations that are based upon calculated percentages. For example, if you have some fringe costs that you need to allocate based upon salaries within the departments, the dynamic allocations module will do that for you very easily. It will look at the salaries for each department, figure out what the percentages should be for each one of those departments, and allocate that fringe pool accordingly. And you can, of course, dictate what is actually in the fringe pool. So it can take your allocation process from hours per month down to minutes. And that's kind of in the spirit of the AP bill automation too as well. It's all about creating some efficiencies and accuracy. So I like what Sage is doing in these quarterly releases.
And I just wanted to add to that is that if you're finding that whatever process you're doing that is taking a while to get through or taking a long time, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We love to take a look at what you're doing and identify ways that we can streamline that process. We've implemented a lot of Sage Intacct for a lot of our clients, and I would say that after X number of years, whether it be 4 years, 5 years, I think it's always good to do a review or an assessment of how our clients are using Sage Intacct and how well they're leveraging some of the functionality to streamline their back office accounting operations, right? And so if you are finding some that you feel there are some inefficiencies, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help.
So that's what I have for today. We have another polling question.
So good. Let's switch back to our PowerPoint. I think we're wrapping up.
So this was the fourth polling question. Upcoming events.
All right, so we have 2 upcoming events, trends in association travel and expense reporting. So if you are interested in a travel and expense reporting solutions, you may want to check out this webinars on September the 7th. Following that, we have streamline your month-end close process, a deep dive into Trendtech ADRA suite. And so this is looking at the Trendtech ADRA solution to help with your month-end close process. And that's on September 26th. So there's a URL there that you can go to register for these future webinars. And feel free to register for them if you're interested. So this actually concludes our presentation for today. I hope that the information that we presented is helpful to you all. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you everyone for attending our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And it says here the URL isn't available to us through the presentation. So
I can actually answer that live, Bulin. So yes, when we send out the presentation slides as well as the recording for the session, that URL is going to be active. But if you want, if it's easier for everybody, I can also type it here in the chat, but it's markhamevents.com. It just gives you an array of all of the events that are being hosted by Markham as well as Markham Tech. So there's majority of our webinars are CB credits. So feel free to check that website out. And if there's anything of interest, feel free to register. Somebody on our chat said, I missed the last polling question just now. I need ACP certification. So the requirement was 3 out of the 4 polling questions. So if you missed one and if you answered the other 3, you should be good, as well as stayed active for 50 minutes. Other than that, those are the 2 requirements that are needed for CBE is, again, answer 3 out of the 4 polling questions, as well as staying active. So if you missed one polling question, that's okay, because we offered 4 opportunities.
Right.
And sorry, go ahead, Bulin.
No, thank you so much for attending. And there's a lot of webinars that are listed at the Markham events page. And we are part of a CPA firm, so there's a lot of content that are very specific to accounting. Of course, the events that are listed here are technology focused. And so when we do technology focus presentation, we usually will show some technology, some systems, and how they work, and how they can benefit organizations like you. So we look forward to seeing you in future events.
Yes,
Thank
definitely.
you, everyone.
And thank you, Bulin and Troy, for today's presentation. I know I definitely found I think one of the most helpful items that I took away from was the glossary section on Sage. I know I can definitely use a scan through those terminologies as well. But I appreciate, as Bulit had mentioned, thank you everybody for joining us today and for participating. And again, thank you, Bulin and Troy, for hosting us this really great event. And again, just some other housekeeping rules for those who may have joined us a little bit late. Please allow 24 to 48 hours for CPE certifications to be processed. Now, reminder again, in order to qualify for CPE credit, you would have to answer 3 out of the 4 polling questions, as well as be active for 50 minutes. And then presentation slides, as well as the recording of this session, will be provided to you shortly after this presentation. So feel free to check out your inbox, and that will be coming in, I think, within 24 to 48 hours as well.
All right.
Other
Thank
than
you,
that,
everyone.
thank you. And everybody
you.
have a great Labor Day. And
Hey,
thank you.
Troy,
and
do you want to say something?
Oh, no, just thanks everyone for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.